Flight 892 was flying over the Atlantic Ocean at night. Inside the plane, 522 people were relaxing in their seats. Nobody knew that in just 20 minutes, both pilots would collapse unconscious. And their only hope would be a quiet woman sitting in seat 14C. A woman nobody had noticed. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Flight 892 was flying over the Atlantic Ocean at night. Inside the Boeing 777, 522 people sat in their seats. The cabin lights were dimmed. Some passengers were sleeping under thin airline blankets. Some were watching movies on their small screens. Children were playing games on tablets. Business travelers were typing on laptops, their faces lit by the blue glow of their screens. An elderly couple held hands near the window, looking out at the stars. A young mother was rocking her baby to sleep. Everything seemed peaceful. Everything seemed normal. Nobody knew that in just 20 minutes, their lives would depend on one woman. A woman nobody had noticed. A woman sitting quietly in seat 14C. Before you continue reading this incredible true story, please write in the comments which country you are watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing and inspiring stories like this one. The massive aircraft was cruising at 38,000 feet above the dark Atlantic waters. Outside the windows, there was nothing but darkness and stars. The moon cast a silver light on the clouds below. Inside, the cabin was filled with the normal sounds of a long international flight. Quiet conversations in different languages. The steady hum of the jet engines. The occasional announcement from the flight attendants. The soft crying of a baby. The beep of a call button. This was Flight 892 from New York to London Heathrow. A routine overnight flight that thousands of people take every single week. A flight that usually arrives on time with no problems. A flight that nobody remembers. But this flight would be different. This flight would be remembered forever by everyone on board. In seat 14C, near the middle of the aircraft, sat a woman named Lisa Morgan. She was 51 years old, but looked older because of the tiredness in her eyes. She had short brown hair with gray streaks running through it. She wore a simple navy blue jacket over a white shirt and comfortable jeans. Reading glasses hung on a chain around her neck. On her left hand was a plain gold wedding band, worn smooth from many years of wear. She carried a small black carry-on bag that fit under the seat in front of her. Her shoes were practical flats, easy to walk in. Nothing about her appearance looked special or unusual. She looked exactly like thousands of other middle-aged women who travel alone on business or to visit family. The kind of person you see in an airport or on a plane and immediately forget. Invisible. Ordinary. Unremarkable. Lisa was holding a paperback novel in her hands. The pages were open, but she was not really reading the words. Her eyes moved across the sentences without understanding them. She would read a paragraph, then realize she had no idea what she had just read. Her mind was somewhere else. Far away from this airplane. She was thinking about her life. About the choices she had made over the years. About the person she used to be. About the person she had become. Lisa Morgan was not always a quiet, invisible woman in seat 14C. That was not who she really was. 20 years ago, Lisa had been someone completely different. 20 years ago, she was Captain Lisa Morgan, one of the most respected pilots at American Airlines. She had worn the uniform with 4 gold stripes on her shoulders. She had sat in the left seat of the cockpit, the captain's seat, the commander's seat. She had been responsible for multi-million-dollar aircraft and hundreds of human lives on every single flight. Lisa had loved flying since she was a little girl. She grew up near a small airport in Ohio. Every weekend, her father would take her to watch the planes take off and land. She would stand at the fence for hours, watching these magnificent machines defy gravity and soar into the sky. When she was 8 years old, she told her father, "I'm going to be a pilot when I grow up." Her father had smiled and said, "Then you will be a pilot." And she was. Lisa worked hard in school. She studied math and science. She saved money from part-time jobs. When she was 19, she took her first flying lesson at that same small airport where she used to watch planes as a child. The moment she took the controls and felt the aircraft respond to her hands, she knew she had found her calling. This was what she was meant to do. This was who she was meant to be. She earned her private pilot license at age 20. Then her commercial license at 24. She worked as a flight instructor for 2 years, teaching other people how to fly. She flew small cargo planes at night, building up her flight hours. She applied to every airline she could find. Finally, when she was 27 years old, American Airlines hired her as a first officer. She was one of only a few women pilots at the airline at that time. Lisa worked harder than everyone else. She studied more. She practiced more. She volunteered for the difficult flights that other pilots didn't want. She flew in bad weather. She flew red-eye overnight flights. She flew the routes with multiple stops. She never complained. She never called in sick unless she was truly unable to fly. She built a reputation as a pilot who could be trusted with anything. By the time she was 35 years old, Lisa had earned her captain's wings. 4 gold stripes. The left seat. The commander's position. She was now fully in charge of every flight she operated. She flew Boeing 777s, some of the largest passenger aircraft in the world. Each plane was worth over $300 million. Each flight carried between 300 and 400 passengers. Every time she sat in that captain's seat, she held hundreds of lives in her hands. Lisa loved it. Not the power, but the responsibility. She took her duty seriously. Every passenger on her plane was someone's mother or father, someone's son or daughter, someone's husband or wife. They trusted her to get them safely to their destination. She never forgot that trust. She never took it lightly. Over her career, Lisa accumulated more than 15,000 flight hours. She flew through terrible storms. She handled engine failures. She dealt with medical emergencies at 40,000 feet. She landed in strong crosswinds that pushed her plane sideways. She navigated around hurricanes and typhoons. She made emergency landings when warning lights came on. Every single time, she stayed calm. She followed her training. She made the right decisions. She brought everyone home safely. Other pilots respected her. The younger first officers loved flying with her because she taught them so much. The airline management trusted her with the most important flights. She flew dignitaries and celebrities. She flew the inaugural flights on new routes. She was invited to train new pilots in the simulator. Her career was everything she had dreamed of as a little girl standing at the airport fence. But then life changed. Life always changes, whether we want it to or not. When Lisa was 41 years old, her husband got sick. His name was Tom. He was a high school math teacher. They had been married for 15 years. They had no children, just each other. Tom was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. The doctor said he needed surgery immediately. Then chemotherapy. Then radiation. The treatment would take at least a year, maybe 2 years. Maybe longer. Someone needed to be with Tom. Someone needed to take him to his appointments. Someone needed to sit with him during the 8-hour chemotherapy sessions. Someone needed to help him when he was too weak to walk. Someone needed to hold him when he was scared. Someone needed to be there at 3 a.m. when the side effects made him sick. Someone needed to research treatments and talk to doctors and manage medications. Lisa could not do all of that while flying international routes. Her schedule was unpredictable. She would be gone for 4 or 5 days at a time. Sometimes longer. She would be on the other side of the world when Tom needed her. She would miss his doctor's appointments. She would miss his treatments. She would leave him alone when he was suffering. Lisa had a choice to make. Her career or her husband. Her dream or her marriage. Flying or love. For Lisa, it was not really a choice at all. She loved Tom more than she loved flying. She loved him more than she loved her career. She loved him more than she loved the captain's seat and the 4 gold stripes and the respect of other pilots. Tom needed her. And when someone you love needs you, nothing else matters. Lisa took early retirement from American Airlines. She was only 41 years old. She still had 20 years of flying ahead of her. But she walked away from it all. She turned in her uniform. She said goodbye to her colleagues. She gave up the captain's seat. She stopped being Captain Lisa Morgan. She became just Lisa. A wife. A caregiver. A woman supporting her sick husband. The next 3 years were the hardest of Lisa's life. She watched Tom suffer. She watched the cancer and the treatment destroy his body. He lost his hair. He lost 50 pounds. He was sick all the time. Some days he was too weak to get out of bed. Lisa was there for all of it. She drove him to every appointment. She sat with him during every treatment. She held his hand when he cried. She cleaned him when he was too sick to take care of himself. She researched alternative treatments. She talked to doctors. She managed a complex schedule of medications. She learned to give injections. She became a nurse, a researcher, an advocate, and a companion. She never complained. She never regretted her decision. Yes, she missed flying. She missed the cockpit. She missed the feeling of taking a massive aircraft off the ground and climbing into the sky. She missed the challenge and the responsibility and the satisfaction of doing something she was extraordinarily good at. But she would give it all up 1,000 times over for Tom. And Tom survived. After 3 years of brutal treatment, the cancer went into remission. The doctors said it was gone. Tom slowly regained his strength. He put weight back on. His hair grew back. He returned to teaching. He was alive. He was healthy. He had beaten cancer. Lisa's sacrifice had been worth it. But by then, Lisa was 44 years old. She had not flown in 3 years. Her skills were rusty. Her certifications had expired. The airline had changed. New procedures. New technology. New aircraft systems. If she wanted to return to flying, she would have to start almost from the beginning. Medical exams. Written tests. Simulator training. Check rides. Months of work. Thousands of dollars in costs. And no guarantee that the airline would hire her back. Lisa thought about it. She really did. But something inside her had changed. The fire that had driven her to become a pilot was not burning as brightly anymore. She was tired. She was 44 years old and felt 60. 3 years of watching someone you love nearly die changes you. It changes what you think is important. It changes what you want from life. Lisa decided not to go back to the airlines. Instead, she got a simple job at a bookstore in their small town in Maine. She worked there part-time, a few days a week. She shelved books. She helped customers. She made recommendations. It was easy work. Peaceful work. Work that didn't require her to make life-or-death decisions at 40,000 feet. She and Tom lived quietly. They took walks together. They had dinner every night. They watched movies. They read books. They worked in their small garden. Tom taught his high school students. Lisa worked at the bookstore. It was a simple life. A quiet life. A peaceful life. A life that millions of people live and are happy with. But sometimes, late at night, Lisa would dream about flying. She would dream she was back in the cockpit of a 777. She would dream about the feeling of the controls in her hands. She would dream about breaking through the clouds into brilliant sunshine at 35,000 feet. She would dream about the satisfaction of making a perfect landing. And when she woke up from those dreams, she would feel an ache in her chest. A sadness. A sense of loss for the person she used to be. But she never talked about it. Not even to Tom. She had made her choice. She had given up flying to save her husband's life. And she would make the same choice again. Even if some part of her heart would always belong to the sky. Now, 7 years after her retirement, 10 years after her last commercial flight, Lisa was flying as a passenger for the first time in many years. She was going to London to visit her younger sister Karen, who had moved there 5 years ago. Tom couldn't come because he had to work. The school year had just started. So Lisa was traveling alone. Sitting in seat 14C. Reading a book she wasn't really reading. Thinking about her life and her choices and the person she used to be. In the cockpit of Flight 892, 2 pilots were in command. Captain James Parker sat in the left seat. He was 48 years old, with gray hair and reading glasses. He had been flying for American Airlines for 22 years. He was experienced, skilled, and professional. This was his second flight of the day. He was tired but alert. Next to him, in the right seat, sat First Officer David Chen. David was 32 years old, relatively young but well-trained. He had been with the airline for 6 years. This was his first year as a first officer on the 777. He was eager and careful and always double-checked everything. James and David were a good crew. They had flown together several times before. They trusted each other. The flight had been completely normal so far. They had taken off from New York's JFK Airport at 9:15 p.m., right on schedule. The weather had been perfect. Clear skies. Light winds. The climb to cruising altitude had been smooth. All the systems on the aircraft were working perfectly. Every gauge showed normal readings. Every light showed green. They had been flying for 2 hours and 15 minutes. They were now halfway across the Atlantic Ocean, about 800 miles from the coast of Canada. James and David were talking about normal things. David was telling James about his new apartment in Queens. James was talking about his daughter's upcoming wedding. They were relaxed. The autopilot was flying the plane. Their job was to monitor the systems and make sure everything stayed normal. Which it was. Everything was completely normal. Until it wasn't. James felt it first. A strange sensation. Like his head was becoming heavy. Like someone had wrapped a thick blanket around his brain. He blinked several times, trying to clear his vision. Everything looked slightly blurry. The instrument panel seemed to swim in front of his eyes. He felt dizzy, like the cockpit was slowly spinning. David, James said, and his voice sounded strange in his own ears. Thick. Distant. I don't feel right. David turned to look at him. What's wrong, Captain? I don't know. My head feels strange. I feel dizzy. James tried to shake his head to clear it, but that made the dizziness worse. His hands felt weak on the control column. His arms felt heavy. Something's not right. David's eyes widened with concern. Should I call for medical assistance? James tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. His mouth felt numb. His tongue felt thick. The cockpit was spinning faster now. The instruments were blurring together. He tried to reach for the radio, but his arm wouldn't obey him properly. It moved slowly, like he was underwater. David watched in growing horror as Captain James Parker's eyes rolled back in his head. James slumped forward in his seat, his body going limp. His hands fell away from the controls. He was unconscious. "Captain." "James." David reached over and shook James's shoulder. No response. James was completely out. David's heart began to pound. His training kicked in. He grabbed the radio microphone. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is American Flight 892. Captain is unconscious. I need immediate assistance. I need." But David never finished that sentence. Because suddenly, he felt it too. That same heavy feeling in his head. That same dizziness. That same sensation of the world spinning around him. His vision blurred. The instrument panel became a mess of colored lights that made no sense. He tried to reach for the oxygen mask above his head. His hand moved so slowly. Too slowly. Like moving through thick syrup. David's last conscious thought was, "We're going to crash. All these people are going to die." Then David Chen collapsed forward in his seat, unconscious. His head hit the instrument panel with a soft thud. Both pilots were now unconscious. The plane was flying itself on autopilot at 38,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean. 522 people were on board. And nobody in the cabin had any idea that anything was wrong. The plane was still flying straight and level. The engines hummed normally. The cabin pressure was stable. From a passenger's perspective, everything seemed fine. But in the cockpit, warning lights were beginning to flash. Alarms were starting to beep softly. The radio was crackling with calls from air traffic control, trying to reach Flight 892 for a routine position report. Calls that nobody was answering. In the cabin, the passengers continued with their activities. Some were sleeping. Some were watching movies. Some were reading. A flight attendant named Jennifer was walking through the aisle, collecting empty cups and napkins from the beverage service. She was 29 years old and had worked for American Airlines for 6 years. She was good at her job. Friendly with passengers. Professional. Calm in stressful situations. Suddenly, Jennifer noticed something unusual. A series of chimes came from the forward galley. 3 high-pitched tones. Then again. 3 more tones. Jennifer knew what those tones meant. They were the emergency call from the cockpit. The pilots were signaling that they needed immediate assistance from the cabin crew. Jennifer's smile disappeared. She quickly walked to the front of the aircraft, to the forward galley where the cockpit door was located. She picked up the intercom phone. "Cockpit, this is Jennifer. You called?" No answer. She called again. "Cockpit, this is lead flight attendant. Do you need assistance?" Still no answer. Jennifer felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. This was not normal. Pilots always answered the intercom immediately. She knocked on the cockpit door. 3 sharp knocks. The sound echoed in the quiet galley. No response from inside. She knocked again, harder this time. "Captain." "First officer. This is Jennifer. Please respond." Nothing. Just silence. Jennifer's hands were shaking now. She had been trained for many emergencies. Fires. Medical emergencies. Unruly passengers. Severe turbulence. But she had never been trained for this. For the pilots not responding at all. She entered the emergency code into the keypad next to the door. The lock clicked. She pushed the door open slowly, not knowing what she would find inside. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. Both pilots were slumped in their seats. Captain Parker was leaning forward, his head almost touching the control column. First Officer Chen had collapsed sideways, his shoulder pressing against the side window. Neither one was moving. The cockpit was full of flashing lights and beeping alarms. The radio was making a loud static sound. And nobody was flying the plane. Jennifer stood frozen in the doorway for maybe 3 seconds. It felt like 3 hours. Her mind was trying to process what she was seeing. Both pilots unconscious. Nobody in control. 522 people depending on who? On what? Her training kicked in. She stepped into the cockpit and checked both pilots for pulses. Captain Parker had a strong pulse. So did First Officer Chen. They were alive. They were breathing. But they were completely unconscious. They were not waking up no matter how much she shook them or called their names. Jennifer stepped back into the galley. Her mind was racing. She needed to get help. But what kind of help? What could anyone do? She picked up the cabin intercom phone with shaking hands. She tried to keep her voice calm and professional, but she could hear the fear creeping into her words. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention please? This is an emergency announcement. We need to locate any pilots currently aboard this aircraft. If you are a pilot, or if you have any flight experience, please come to the forward cabin immediately. I repeat, if you are a pilot or have flight training, please identify yourself to a flight attendant immediately. This is an emergency. The effect of this announcement on the cabin was instant and dramatic. The passengers who had been sleeping woke up immediately. The people who had been watching movies pulled out their earbuds. Parents grabbed their children. Everyone started talking at once. The cabin filled with noise. Questions. Fear. Panic. What's wrong? Why do we need a pilot? Where are the pilots? Are we crashing? Oh my God, oh my God. Children started crying. Some people started praying. Others took out their phones to send goodbye messages to their families, even though the phones had no signal over the Atlantic Ocean. The fear spread through the cabin like wildfire. The other flight attendants tried to calm people down, but they were scared too. They didn't know what was happening. They only knew that something was very, very wrong. In seat 14C, Lisa Morgan heard the announcement. She felt her entire body go cold. She knew exactly what those words meant. She had heard similar announcements in simulator training. She had studied emergency procedures for pilot incapacitation. She knew that if the flight attendant was asking for pilots over the intercom, it meant both cockpit crew members were unable to fly the aircraft. It meant 522 people were in a plane with no pilots. Lisa sat frozen in her seat. Her mind was racing. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She felt like she couldn't breathe. She hadn't flown a plane in 10 years. 10 years. She didn't know the new procedures. She didn't know the updated systems. Yes, she had 15,000 hours of experience. Yes, she had been a captain on 777s. But that was a decade ago. Could she still do it? What if she made a mistake? What if she crashed the plane? 522 people would die. Because of her. But another voice spoke up in her mind. A voice that sounded like her old flight instructor from 30 years ago. Lisa, if you don't help, what happens? If you stay in your seat and do nothing, what's the outcome? Lisa knew the answer. If nobody helped, the plane would eventually run out of fuel. Or the autopilot would malfunction. Or they would fly into weather. Or 100 other things could go wrong. Without pilots, everyone on this plane would die. It was just a matter of time. But if she helped, at least they had a chance. Maybe she couldn't remember everything. Maybe she would make mistakes. But she was still a pilot. Deep down, in her bones, in her blood, in her muscle memory. She was still a pilot. And pilots don't abandon their passengers. Lisa looked around the cabin. She saw the fear on people's faces. She saw a young mother holding a baby, tears streaming down her face. She saw the elderly couple she had noticed earlier, holding hands so tightly their knuckles were white. She saw a teenage boy with headphones on, his eyes wide with terror. She saw a businessman in a suit, frantically trying to get his phone to work. She saw all these people. All these lives. These people needed help. They needed someone who knew what to do. And like it or not, ready or not, confident or not, she was that someone. She was the only person on this plane who could fly it. Lisa unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up. Her legs felt weak and shaky. She had to hold on to the seat in front of her for a moment to steady herself. Then she started walking toward the front of the plane. As she walked up the aisle, people stared at her. She didn't look like a pilot. She was wearing jeans and a jacket. She looked like somebody's mom. Somebody's aunt. Just an ordinary middle-aged woman. People looked at her with confusion. Some with hope. Some with doubt. Lisa reached the forward galley. Jennifer and 2 other flight attendants were standing there. They all looked terrified. When they saw Lisa, Jennifer's face filled with desperate hope. "Are you a pilot?" Jennifer asked, her voice shaking. "Yes," Lisa said quietly. "I'm a pilot. I can help. Are you current? Do you know how to fly this aircraft?" Jennifer grabbed Lisa's arm, holding on like Lisa was a life preserver in a stormy ocean. "I flew 777s for American Airlines for 15 years, Lisa said, her voice growing steadier. "I was a captain. I have 15,000 hours. I retired 10 years ago, but I can fly this plane. I can do this." Jennifer almost collapsed with relief. Tears filled her eyes. "Thank God. Thank God you're here. Please, come with me." Jennifer opened the cockpit door. Lisa stepped through it. And suddenly, she was in a world she thought she had left behind forever. The cockpit of a Boeing 777 is one of the most complex work environments in the world. There are hundreds of switches, buttons, dials, screens, gauges, and indicators. 6 large display screens dominate the instrument panel. Overhead is a panel with hundreds more switches. Every surface has controls. Most people would look at it and feel completely overwhelmed. Lost. Helpless. But to Lisa, it was like coming home. Her eyes automatically scanned the instrument panel. Airspeed. Altitude. Heading. Attitude. Engine parameters. Fuel. Navigation. Everything her training had taught her to check. Everything she had looked at thousands and thousands of times during her career. Even after 10 years away, her body remembered. Her mind remembered. Her hands knew where everything was before she even thought about it. Both pilots were still unconscious. Lisa checked their pulses again. Both were strong and regular. They were alive. They were breathing. Whatever had happened to them, they would probably be okay eventually. But right now, they were completely unable to help. She was on her own. Lisa sat down in the captain's seat. The left seat. The commander's seat. She had not sat in this seat for 10 years. She adjusted it to her height, just like she had done 1,000 times before. She put on the headset. Her hands moved to the controls automatically, touching them gently, reacquainting herself with the feel of them. She took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. But she forced herself to be calm. Forced herself to think clearly. She was a pilot. This was what pilots do. They stay calm. They assess the situation. They make decisions. They execute procedures. They solve problems. Lisa pressed the radio button. Her voice came out steady and professional, with that particular cadence that all experienced pilots have when talking to air traffic control. "Gander Center, this is American Flight 892. I am declaring an emergency. There was a brief pause. Then a male voice came back, sounding surprised. Flight 892, Gander Center. Go ahead with your emergency. Gander, my name is Lisa Morgan. I am a passenger on this aircraft. I am a former airline captain with 15,000 hours. Both cockpit crew members are unconscious. I am taking command of this aircraft. Another pause, longer this time. Lisa could imagine the controller trying to process what he had just heard. A passenger was flying the plane. Flight 892. Can you confirm you are a qualified pilot? Affirmative, Gander. I was a captain on 777s for American Airlines. I retired 10 years ago. I hold an airline transport pilot license. I am rated on this aircraft type. I can fly this plane. Flight 892, understood. What is your current situation? Lisa's eyes scanned the instruments as she spoke. Autopilot is engaged. Aircraft is at 38,000 feet. Speed is 490 knots. Course is 075 degrees. All systems appear normal. Both pilots are unconscious but alive with stable vital signs. Unknown cause of incapacitation. Flight 892, can you check cabin pressure and oxygen systems? Lisa's eyes immediately went to those instruments. And she saw the problem. The cabin pressure was slowly decreasing. Not rapidly, but steadily dropping. The oxygen level in the cockpit was reading below normal. This was why the pilots had collapsed. They had been slowly deprived of oxygen. Hypoxia. The silent killer. Gander, I've found the problem. Cabin pressurization is failing. Cockpit oxygen is low. The pilots passed out from hypoxia. Flight 892, you need to descend immediately. Get below 10,000 feet where you can breathe without pressurization. Lisa knew this. She had trained for this exact emergency many times in the simulator. But doing it in a simulator, where you can just hit reset if something goes wrong, is completely different from doing it in real life. In real life, if she made a mistake, 522 people would die. There was no reset button. Her right hand moved to the autopilot controls. She disengaged the autopilot. A small light came on, and she felt the plane respond to her touch on the controls. The aircraft was now under her direct manual control. She was flying it. Really flying it. For the first time in 10 years. Her left hand moved to the throttle levers. She pulled them back slightly, reducing power. Her right hand pushed forward gently on the control column. The nose of the aircraft tilted downward. They began to descend. Gander, Flight 892 is beginning emergency descent. Flight 892, Roger. We're clearing all traffic from your path. Descend to 10,000 feet. Report passing flight levels. Lisa watched the altimeter. The numbers were dropping. 37,000 feet. 36,000, 35,000. The plane was descending at 3,000 feet per minute. That was fast, but not dangerously fast. She had to find the right balance. Descend fast enough to get to breathable air before more people passed out. But not so fast that the rapid pressure change damaged the aircraft or hurt the passengers. The plane shuddered slightly. Lisa made a small adjustment. The ride smoothed out. Her hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. She was in her element. She was doing what she had been trained to do. What she was born to do. In the cabin, passengers felt the descent. The nose-down attitude was obvious. Some people screamed. Children cried louder. The flight attendants made announcements trying to keep people calm. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are making an emergency descent. This is a precautionary measure. Please remain calm. But people were not calm. They were terrified. They knew something was very wrong. Lisa kept her eyes on the instruments. 30,000 feet. 28,000, 25,000. She was monitoring airspeed, engine temperatures, altitude, rate of descent. Her mind was processing dozens of pieces of information simultaneously. This was what years of training and experience had prepared her for. At 20,000 feet, she began to level off the descent slightly. The rate decreased from 3,000 feet per minute to 2,000. She was being careful not to overstress the airframe. 15,000 feet. She could see clouds below them now, lit by the moon. Beautiful. But she had no time to appreciate beauty. She was focused entirely on flying the plane. At 12,000 feet, she began to level off completely. She pulled back on the control column. The nose came up. The descent rate decreased. 1,000 feet per minute. 500, 200. Level. They were at 10,000 feet. The cabin pressure had stabilized. The oxygen level was now normal. People could breathe safely. Lisa keyed the radio. Gander, Flight 892 is level at 10,000 feet. Cabin pressure is stable. Flight 892, excellent work. Stand by. In the cockpit, Captain James Parker groaned. His eyes fluttered open. He looked around, confused and disoriented. He saw Lisa sitting in his seat, flying his plane. For a moment, he couldn't process what he was seeing. What happened, he mumbled. Lisa glanced at him briefly. I'm Lisa Morgan. I'm a pilot. You and your first officer passed out from hypoxia. There was a pressurization failure. I'm flying the aircraft. Just sit still for a moment. Let your head clear. James tried to sit up straight. Everything felt fuzzy. His head hurt. The plane is fine. I have control. We're at 10,000 feet. Everything is stable. Just breathe slowly and let the oxygen get back into your system. Next to James, David Chen was also starting to wake up. He opened his eyes and immediately looked panicked. What, where? You're okay, Lisa said calmly. Both of you passed out. I'm flying the plane. You're safe. Both pilots were groggy and confused, but they were alive and conscious. That was good. But Lisa knew she still had a major problem. She had to land this plane. And landing was the hardest part of flying. She pressed the radio button again. Gander, both pilots are regaining consciousness. They are groggy but responsive. Request vectors to nearest suitable airport for emergency landing. Flight 892, nearest airport is Gander International Airport. That's us. We are 230 miles ahead of you. We're clearing all traffic. You are cleared direct to Gander. Descend and maintain 5,000 feet. Flight 892 copies. Direct Gander, descending to 5,000. Lisa turned the plane. The wings tilted. The nose pointed toward Canada. Toward land. Toward safety. She had 230 miles to prepare for the landing. 230 miles to remember everything she had learned. To remember all her training. To make sure she did this right. James Parker was feeling better now. His head was clearing. He understood what had happened. He looked at Lisa with awe and gratitude. You're flying the plane. Yes, Lisa said, not taking her eyes off the instruments. You're really a pilot. I was a captain for American, like you. I flew 777s for 15 years. I retired 10 years ago. And you just took over. Someone had to. Lisa's voice was calm. Matter of fact. James shook his head in amazement. What do you need from us? Can you handle the radios? Call out speeds and altitudes during landing. Help with the checklist? Yes. I can do that. James moved back into his proper position in his seat. He was still weak and dizzy, but he could help. David was also recovering. He could assist too. The flight to Gander took 35 minutes. Lisa flew manually the entire time. She didn't trust the autopilot after the pressurization failure. She wanted complete control. Her hands never left the controls. Her eyes moved constantly between the instruments and the view outside. The controller at Gander guided her in. Flight 892, you are 50 miles from the airport. Begin descent to 3,000 feet. We have you on radar. Weather is clear. Wind is light. Runway 13 is clear for your landing. All emergency services are standing by. Flight 892, Roger. Descending to 3,000. Lisa could see lights ahead now. The lights of Gander. The airport. Safety. But she still had to land. That was the most critical part. She had to bring this 300-ton aircraft down onto a runway at exactly the right speed, exactly the right angle. Exactly the right point. One mistake could be catastrophic. She ran through the landing checklist in her mind. She had done this thousands of times. But never after a 10-year break. Never under these circumstances. Landing gear down, she said. James reached forward and moved the lever. There was a rumbling sound as the massive wheels extended from the belly of the aircraft. 3 green lights came on, indicating the gear was down and locked. Flaps 20, Lisa commanded. David moved the flap lever. The trailing edge of the wings extended, creating more lift and more drag. The plane slowed. Flaps 30. More extension. More drag. The aircraft slowed further. Lisa lined up with the runway. It appeared ahead, a strip of lights in the darkness. It looked impossibly small. But she knew it was long enough. She had landed at Gander before, years ago. Speed 180 knots, James called out. Good. That was correct for this stage. 1,000 feet, James said. Lisa's eyes moved between the runway and the instruments. Airspeed. Altitude. Rate of descent. Everything had to be perfect. 500 feet. Speed 160. Almost there. Lisa made tiny corrections with the controls. A little left. A little right. Up slightly. Keep the descent rate steady. 400 feet. The runway was coming up fast. The landing lights illuminated the pavement. 300 feet. 200 feet. Speed 150. Perfect approach speed. Lisa eased back on the control column slightly. The nose lifted a tiny bit. 100 feet. 50 feet. Lisa pulled back a little more on the controls. She reduced power. The plane descended the final feet. 30 feet. 20. 10. The main wheels touched the runway. Smooth. Gentle. Perfect. Lisa pushed the levers forward to activate the reverse thrusters. The engines roared. The plane began to slow. She pressed gently on the brakes. Not too hard. Steady pressure. The plane slowed. 150 knots. 100 knots. 80, 60. 40, it rolled down the runway, slower and slower, until it came to a complete stop. Lisa pulled the parking brake. She shut down the engines. The cockpit became quiet except for the cooling sounds of the aircraft. She sat back in the seat. Her hands were shaking again. Her whole body was shaking. She felt tears running down her face. She had done it. She had saved 522 people. In the cabin, there was a moment of complete silence. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then everyone. The cabin erupted in applause and cheers and tears. People were crying with relief. Hugging strangers. Praying. Laughing. Sobbing. They were alive. They were safe. They were on the ground. Emergency vehicles surrounded the plane. Fire trucks. Ambulances. Police cars. Medical teams boarded the aircraft immediately. They checked the pilots. They checked passengers. Everyone was okay. The pressurization failure had affected only the cockpit because of how the air system was designed. The passengers had been safe the whole time. They just didn't know it. Captain James Parker unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up, still a little unsteady. He looked at Lisa with tears in his eyes. He held out his hand. "You saved our lives," he said, his voice breaking. "You saved everyone. I don't know how to thank you." Lisa shook his hand. Her own voice was unsteady. "I'm just glad I was here. I'm glad I could help." "You're a hero," James said. "A real hero." Lisa shook her head. "I'm just a pilot. This is what pilots do." But she knew it was more than that. She had made a choice. She could have stayed in seat 14C. She could have stayed invisible. She could have let someone else handle it. But she didn't. She stood up. She walked to the cockpit. She took control. She saved 522 lives. The airline executives arrived within hours. The media arrived. Everyone wanted to talk to Lisa Morgan, the quiet woman from seat 14C who had saved an entire plane full of people. Reporters asked her questions. Cameras filmed her. Her face was on every news channel in the world. Former pilot saves 522 people in emergency landing over Atlantic. Hero pilot comes out of retirement to save passengers. Woman in seat 14C becomes unexpected hero. The story spread everywhere. Lisa gave interviews. She explained what had happened. She described the emergency. She talked about her background. The media discovered her whole story. Her career. Her early retirement to care for her sick husband. Her quiet life in Maine. Everything. American Airlines offered her a job immediately. The CEO called her personally. "Captain Morgan, we would be honored to have you back. We need pilots like you. Experienced. Skilled. Brave. Please come back to us." Lisa told them she needed time to think. She needed to talk to Tom. She needed to figure out what she wanted. She flew home to Maine as a passenger on another flight. This time, the crew recognized her. The captain invited her to visit the cockpit. The flight attendants thanked her. The passengers applauded when she boarded. She was famous now. No longer invisible. Tom picked her up at the airport. He hugged her for a long time. "I saw the news," he said. "I'm so proud of you. You were amazing." They drove home. They sat in their living room with cups of tea. Lisa told him the whole story. Everything she had felt. The fear. The doubt. The decision to help. The feeling of sitting in the captain's seat again. The landing. "I forgot how much I loved it," Lisa said quietly. "I forgot how much I missed it." Tom took her hand. "The airline wants you back." "Yes." "What do you want?" Lisa thought about it. Really thought about it. "I want to fly again. I want to be a pilot again. Not just someone who used to be a pilot. An actual pilot." Tom smiled. "Then you should do it. I'm healthy now. I don't need you to take care of me anymore. You saved my life by giving up flying. Now I'm giving you permission to go back. Go be who you're meant to be. Lisa felt something break loose inside her chest. Something that had been locked up for 10 years. Permission. Not just from Tom. But from herself. Permission to be who she really was. 3 months later, Captain Lisa Morgan walked into the American Airlines Training Center in Dallas. She did her medical exams. She passed. She did her written tests. She passed. She did simulator training. She remembered everything. It all came back to her like she had never left. The muscle memory. The procedures. The decision-making. It was all still there. She did her check ride with an FAA examiner. He was tough. He threw every emergency at her in the simulator. Engine failures. System failures. Weather. She handled everything perfectly. At the end, he shook her hand. Captain Morgan, you're one of the best pilots I've evaluated in years. Welcome back. Lisa got her 4 stripes back. Captain's wings. She was back in uniform. Back where she belonged. Her first flight back was a Boston to Miami route. A simple domestic flight. Nothing like the transatlantic emergency she had handled. But it meant everything to her. When she walked through the cabin in her uniform before takeoff, passengers recognized her. Some asked for pictures. Some thanked her. One elderly woman grabbed her hand and said, "I was on that flight to London. You saved my life. Thank you." Lisa sat in the captain's seat. Her seat. She ran through the checklist. She started the engines. She called for clearance. She taxied to the runway. And when the tower cleared her for takeoff, she pushed the throttles forward and took that Boeing 777 into the sky. She was flying again. She was home. Over the next few years, Lisa flew thousands more hours. She trained new pilots. She mentored young first officers. She told them her story. She told them that being a pilot is not just a job. It's a responsibility. A calling. When you sit in that seat, you're responsible for every single person on that plane. That responsibility never ends. Not when you retire. Not when you're sitting in seat 14C. Never. And she never forgot that night over the Atlantic. The night when 522 people needed her. The night when she could have stayed invisible. But instead, she chose to stand up. To walk to the cockpit. To take the controls. To be who she really was. Some people are born to fly. Lisa Morgan was one of those people. She tried to walk away from it. She tried to be invisible. But when 522 people needed her, she discovered something important. You can retire from your job. But you can never retire from who you really are. She was a pilot. She would always be a pilot. And when people needed her, she would always answer the call.